Hey, it's Webs here with the final day of the Murder at Castle Nathria card reviews. This time we have 38, I think, if I remember right, to go over because I didn't actually do the last two cards that were revealed before this. So let's begin. The first card being Anonymous Informant, which is a 2-cost neutral minion with 2 attack, 3 HP. Battlecry, the next secret you play costs 0. This is just a better Kirin Mage, which was a classic card if I remember right. That did see some play back in the day, but this one is just generically better overall, and it is available for each class that actually has secrets and the ones that don't, especially given the fact that we do have a neutral minion that allows any other class to have access to any secrets. Though I don't think this will see play in a non-secret based class. This is just really good support for secret anything, to be honest, and probably will see play as long as we keep getting more and more secrets. The next card revealed is Creepy Painting, which is a 3-cost minion with 0 attack, 6 HP. After another minion dies, become a copy of it. It's one of those minions that basically has a pseudo taunt on it that your opponent is going to want to get rid of this as quickly as humanly possible, so you don't actually give your opponent a additional copy of a very important minion, which might make it see a little bit of play. However, at the same time, I don't know how useful this is going to be. It is a 3-cost minion with 6 HP, which is pretty decent. However, you could in theory use it in Priest, where you're not using a bunch of other minions and you're just buffing this up as much as humanly possible, since it does have 6 HP, and that's actually a pretty good stat line for a Priest deck like that. Now for the next card, which is Dinner Performer, which is a 3-cost neutral minion with 2 attack, 3 HP. Battlecry, summon a random minion from your deck that you can afford to play. Cool card for Death Rattle decks. However, if you are using a bunch of Battlecry minions, you're probably not going to want to use this in that type of deck. But if it's any type of deck where you don't need to rely on a bunch of Battlecries outside of this one, this card is probably pretty decent for you to actually want to play it. It does allow you to basically free minion out of your deck really easily, which is really good, as long as it costs 7 or less, depending on what turn you actually play it on. Or I guess if you're Druid, you could play this with any cost minion that you possibly want, which means this will probably end up seeing some type of play. If you can cheat out some really big minion, this is going to be really good, though it's going to be really awkward to actually get the secondary copy of this off of itself, which is something that you never will want to actually see. Now for Dredge Staff, which is a 1-cost neutral minion with 1 attack, 2 HP. Battlecry, give minions in your hand plus 1 health. This is really good for aggro decks, especially ones that are using Peasant right now, or any other 1-drop minion that has 1 HP, or any other minion with 1 HP, as this should allow you to make those minions survive a little bit longer and not actually instantly die to certain hero powers. Sure, it isn't really an offensive card, but it does make your aggro-based minions a lot harder to get rid of, and that's why this will probably see a lot of play in my opinion. Now for the next card, Muck Plumber, which is a 5-cost neutral minion with 5 attack, 5 HP. All minions cost 2 more. Decent enough card. I don't think this one will see much play because cards like this usually don't see too much play. It's going to be something that you randomly generate in Evolve Shaman and screw over your opponent, but to actually include it in a deck is probably not going to happen. Sure, minions are a lot more relevant than some of the other weird conditional things that we've seen in the past, such as Battlecry minions or spells, but again, I don't think this is really that good. We also are seeing another minion in this set that makes your opponent's minions cost 1 more for the next turn, which will probably see a lot more play than something like this. And now for Ben Hearthstone's card, Murlocia, which is a 4-cost neutral Murloc with 3 attack, 4 HP, lifesteal, infuse 4. This costs 0, and this is what it looks like when it's infused. Honestly, Murloc decks could probably run a card like this because the infuse isn't going to be too hard to actually make work. However, at the same time, I really still don't like the infuse mechanic overall, but this is probably one of the better ones, especially in what decks that it would naturally fit in. And there are a bunch of ways to mana cheat in Murloc Shaman and Murloc Warlock, where a 4-cost Murloc wouldn't be that bad anyways, either way. Just a good generic Murloc that a lot of classes can actually use. Now for the next card, Roosting Gargoyle, which is a 2-cost neutral minion with 2 attack, 3 HP. Battlecry, give a friendly beast plus 2 attack. This is a weird neutral card to actually include, but I guess the secret support is also kind of weird for them to include as neutral cards. I don't think this one will see any play at all, just because, sure, there are some beasts where you would want to give them an additional 2 attack, but there's just a lot of ways to actually buff up beasts besides this, that those classes that actually are going to run beast minions will be able to consistently get off. I think this is a definition of a pack filler card, at least in my opinion. And now for Scuttlebutt Ghoul, which is a 4-cost neutral minion with 2 attack, 5 HP, taunt. Battlecry, if you control a secret, summon a copy of this. This is basically the card from Dark Moon Fair, I think, that Mage had, but with taunt, where it would summon an additional copy of itself if you had a secret on board. So this will probably see some play, just because there are that have access to secrets, and having a generic good taunt minion is probably pretty decent for those types of decks, especially because you can get 2 copies of this for 4 mana, and that's not really that hard of a condition to fulfill for decks like that. It's interesting to me that a lot of the really good secret support in this set is going to be neutral cards, but we'll see if any other classes in the future get additional secrets. It would be cool to see other classes get more secrets besides just Rogue, Mage, Hunter, and Paladin, but I guess that would take away from their uniqueness. Now for Stoneborn Accuser, which is a 5-cost neutral minion with 5 attack, 5 HP, infuse 5, gain Battlecry, deal 5 damage. I don't think this one will see play at all. Classes that will want to do 5 damage to your opponent's face or something else will probably just run something else. Most of the time, this is just going to be a 5-drop with 5 attack, 5 HP, as infuse is still not a mechanic that I'm really convinced on being really good, and the ways that you would actually abuse this would require you to run token-based decks and then have some type of way to duplicate the battle cry of this or duplicate this card in your hand, and that just doesn't exist right now in standard. I know Bran exists, but at max this would be 20 damage, and some classes that would want to run this, such as Hunter, have cards like Ancient Krakenbane that are just a lot better than a card like this. Now for the next one, which is Sinstone Totem. This is a neutral totem that costs 1 with 0 attack, 3 HP. At the end of your turn, gain a +1 health. This is just generic good support for Totem Shaman, which is the only class that can use something like this. This also does dilute the pool from Amalgam of the Depths when you use it on a totem, just so you don't get some of the really good totems in Shaman as consistently. I do think this will probably see a little bit of play, maybe not actually in Shaman itself, but maybe in Priest, just because you could use buffs on this to then use a Bless, thus getting a really high attack minion pretty easily. And this does scale each individual turn, and does have a nice stat line where it's going to be pretty hard to actually get rid of on turn 1. So probably going to see play, probably not in the class that most people expected to see play though. Now for the next one, which is Stoneborn General, which is a 10-cost neutral minion with 8 attack, 8 HP, rush, death rattle, summon, and 8/8 Grave Wing with rush. This is big death rattle support that we actually needed for something like Death Rattle Druid. However, it does cost 10, so that does make it a little bit more difficult to actually want to run a card like this. At the same time, having 16 worth of stats on a 10-drop is actually pretty good, especially if you use this as a removal tool, and is a hard minion to actually get rid of. I do think this would be a lot more playable if it was at like 9 or 8 mana, but then again, at that mana rate, it might actually be a little bit broken. It could be interesting to try to use this with Smokescreen and Rogue, just as a way to get a bunch of big minions really easily out on the board. Though I don't know if you want to clog up your deck with a 10-cost minion for something like that. Now for the next one, which is Mask Reveler, which is a 6-cost neutral minion with 4 attack, 4 HP, rush, death rattle, summon a 2/2 copy of another minion in your deck. Really good if you are playing a death rattle deck. Bomb Rogue is the first deck that I thought of when I saw a card like this, just because you could get additional copies of the bomb, but I do think this would probably fit better in something like Death Rattle Druid or some other Death Rattle deck besides Rogue, because Rogue doesn't like running more expensive minions. It could be interesting to use this again like the previous card in combination with Smokescreen, so you can actually trigger its Death Rattle easily, and I think this would be perfect for doing something like that. Though I don't know at 6 mana if this will see much play. It has a lot of potential just because it is another 2/2 copy of probably another Death Rattle minion from your deck, which could in theory be good, but at the same time it might be a little bit slow for the current game. Now for the next one, which is Crooked Cook, which is a reference to a very, very old card, I think in Grand Tournament, where unlike this card, which is a 2-cost neutral minion with 1 attack, 4 HP, and at the end of your turn, if you've dealt 3 or more damage to the enemy hero, draw a card. The original version was if you healed more than 3, then you would draw a card at the end of your turn. That one didn't see much play, but I think this one will see a lot more play because it is just a really good draw card for aggro-based decks, where if you drop this on turn 2, you might actually already have a 3-attack minion, and you can just instantly draw a card for free on turn 2. I think this one will probably see a nerf to it just because of how strong this could be in any type of aggro-based deck, especially given the fact that Aggro Demon Hunter is getting a lot of new cards that actually require you to shuffle more cards back into your own deck, and we will be seeing a card that in combination with this is just broken as hell. Now for the next card, which is Invitation Carrier, which is a 3-cost neutral minion with 3 attack, 4 HP, and after a card is added to your hand from another class, copy it. This is just Thief Priest and Thief Rogue support. Sure, other classes in theory could abuse a card like this, but those are the classes that are going to be able to abuse it the most commonly and the most easily. So in those decks, I think this one will probably see some play. It might make some weird situations with Thief Priest and the one legendary where you don't remember what is the original copy of the card, but hopefully you will keep track of that in some way. Overall, it's a decent enough minion that will probably see a bunch of play in those 2 classes, even if it doesn't see play in any other classes. In theory, it would be really funny to use this in a Lady Prestor deck where you technically draw into cards from another class. It really just depends. Thief Rogue can really abuse this if you are using Maestra though. And now for what I think is the last neutral card, which is Steam Cleaner, which is a 5-cost neutral minion with 5 attack, 5 HP. It is a mech. Battlecry, destroy all cards in both players' deck that didn't start there. This is anti-Kazakusan support and anti-Lady Prestor support. It ruins both of those decks' complete game plan, and it also ruins the Golden Monkey, which I just posted a video about. But at the same time, I think this card is actually pretty needed, especially given the fact if those decks do keep floating around. It is a really annoying type of deck to actually face against because you never know what your opponent is going to play against, but they are very Hearthstone-like decks, so it is kind of sad to see a card like this printed, but I think it was absolutely necessary. It really depends if those decks still are meta relevant after this new set comes out, if cards like this will see a lot of play, but you could natively run this in a mech Paladin deck or a mech Mage deck without too much worry. Sure, it costs 5, but it's a decent enough mech on its own to actually see some play, especially if you could just randomly generate this off of one of your other mechs too. And now for the last Druid card, which is Death Plume Womper, which is a 6-cost, 7 attack, 6 HP minion with the Battlecry. Draw a Death Rattle minion and gain its Death Rattle. I find it kind of funny that most of the Druid cards that are minions are just references to the different herb nodes in the Shadowlands, which is kind of cool to see. This is actually pretty good Death Rattle support. It's a shame that we didn't see too many more Death Rattle cards for this set. Sure, we did get the location and the suspect and this card, I guess, but outside of those, we didn't see much support. It could be an interesting little deck to try to make work altogether, as there are a bunch of new neutral Death Rattles that could be really powerful with cards like this. I do think this does have a lot of potential, similar to all the other Death Rattle support we've seen for Druid this set. However, I don't know if this is going to make them relevant as of yet. but in the future, I'm pretty sure it will only take 1 or 2 more new cards to make a Death Rattle Druid deck be fully functioning, and Death Rattle is one of the more common keywords, so I wouldn't be shocked if we saw some new neutral cards with a bunch of Death Rattles, or even in the mini set, a new Druid card. Alright, now for the next card, which is Dispose the Evidence, which is a 0 cost Demon Hunter spell that gives your hero 3 attack this turn. Choose a card in your hand to shuffle into your deck. This is the card that I meant by is going to be Broken as Hell with Broken Cook. These 2 cards allow you to instantly draw into a card and have no drawback of the spell in question. This could also be used in a questline Demon Hunter deck where you are using the Razorglaive Sentinel to draw into a bunch of cards, especially given the fact that this is a 0 cost card, and that could be an easy way to go through most of your deck while also discounting it. I do think this one will be probably changed pretty quickly just because of how powerful effect like this is, and only shuffling 1 card back into your deck is not that big of a downside for +3 attack, especially if you can combo this with something like multi-strike where you can get 6 attack. Your weapon, hit a minion with 6 HP, and then hit your opponent's face with 6 HP there and an additional 6 HP. I don't think this is going to be that hard to actually abuse. Now for the next card, which is Sinful Brand, which is a 1 cost Demon Hunter Covenant spell that brands an enemy minion. Whenever it takes damage, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. This kind of has a little bit of anti-synergy with the last card, just given the fact that you are not going to be attacking into a minion with your hero if you are giving it +3 attack. However, this could in theory be really abusable with the Puffer Fister, where you actually just do 1 damage to your opponent's entire board while also using this with multi-strike. Could in theory be incredibly strong. It is a cheap spell and very on brand for what Sinful Brand actually does in World of Warcraft. Now for the last Hunter card, which is Collateral Damage, which is a 8 cost Hunter spell that deals 6 damage to 3 random enemy minions. Excess damage hits the enemy hero. This is basically a AoE version of Piercing Shot, which already sees a lot of play. However, this does cost 8, and Hunter historically doesn't really want to run cards that cost a bunch, especially given that this card would in theory fit really well in questline Hunter, but because of the high cost, you wouldn't be able to play that many other spells, which makes me think a card like this will probably not see play as of yet, though if we do see more big spell support for Hunter in the future, this card could see a lot of play, or this could be used in a more control style Hunter deck, now that we do have 40 card decks, and Hunter could easily abuse that in one of them. Now for some secret mage support, which is Chatty Bartender, which is a 4 cost mage minion with 4 attack, 4 HP. At the end of your turn, if you control a secret, deal 2 damage to all enemies. This condition is incredibly easy to trigger, which means it's probably going to see a lot of play and is going to be very frustrating to actually play against if you are playing a minion based deck. This is such an easy condition to fulfill that, again, I think this will probably be one that will see some nerfs if it does get out of control, especially given the fact that if you have 2 of these, it is 4 damage to the entire enemy board. And if somehow you find additional ways to copy this through things like Zola and Bran, then you could in theory get 8 damage at the end of each individual turn, which is absolutely insane. This ramps up so quickly that I can't see a world where this doesn't see play, even if not all of the mage secrets right now are the most playable ones. And now for the last Covenant spell, Divine Toll, which is a 7 cost holy spell for Paladin that shoots 5 rays at random minions. They give friendly minions +2/+2 and deal 2 damage to an enemy minion. This is almost exactly what I called on this card doing when I was making the video about my predictions for the set. Instead of actually healing the minions as I had expected it to do. It actually is a lot better by giving it +2/+2. However, this does cost 7, so I don't know how consistently something like this is going to see play. There are just much better options for buffs, unless you can guarantee it all on one of your minions if your opponent doesn't have anything on the board. And then this will probably see a lot of play, but if you can't guarantee that, then this card is probably not the best card to actually run in your deck. Really cool artwork. Other than that, I think this is just going to be very niche for at least right now. Now for the next card, which is Service Spell, which is a 3-cost spell for Paladin that discovers a class card from your deck and draw all copies of it. It's really insane how much draw power that Paladin actually has at this point, while Rogue really doesn't have that much good draw power. A card like this will probably see a lot of play, especially if pure Paladin becomes a more relevant deck, and given the next card that we'll go over, I'm pretty sure a deck like that will see a lot of play. This, in theory, is just a draw 3 no matter what. And if you don't even want to run this in pure Paladin, you could run it in a deck where you only run a few Paladin key cards and then draw into whatever key cards that you actually need to draw out of your deck as quickly as humanly possible. But again, I think this will just be really good in pure Paladin, along with a lot of the other draw power we've seen so far for them. Now for the last legendary of the set, which is the Countess, which is a 7-cost, 7-attack, 7 HP Paladin legendary minion. With the battle cry, if your deck has no neutral cards, add 3 legendary invitations to your hand. And the invitations are a 3-cost spell that discovers a legendary minion from another class. It costs 0. This could either be really insane in standard or really, really bad. It really just depends on how much you're going to want to run a pure Paladin deck. But then again, Paladin, as it currently stands outside of Mech Paladin, pure Paladin is pretty darn good overall. And the invitations are only 3 costs mana, which means you could, in theory, mana cheat something out that's very, very powerful. I don't know how consistently you're going to get something that is really strong from another class, but in theory, there are a lot of really powerful minions that you could actually generate from something else. And now for Priest's first card, which is Identity Theft, which is a 3-cost shadow spell. Discover a copy of a card from your opponent's hand and deck. This is really good with the legendary that Priest got. I'm actually kind of shocked that we're seeing a lot of the Priest support. It's cool to see a deck like that return into the game after so long, since there are a bunch of cards that actually came back into the rotation, such as Draconoid Operative, that actually supports that type of class, so maybe that was a hint of what was coming from this set. I do think this one will probably see a lot of play because it is just a 1 card for 2 cards, which is pretty good on card advantage anyways, and you can actually get an idea of what your opponent is actually playing. And if you have the legendary minion, that Priest is also getting a set where you actually steal the original copy of a card whenever you play it, then this card will be absolutely broken and a real annoying card to actually play against. The next card revealed is Partner in Crime, which is a 4-cost 2-attack 5 HP Priest minion. With the battle cry, summon a copy of this minion at the end of your turn. Really good for Bless Priest. However, it does cost a little bit more than something that I would normally want to run in that type of deck as a really good target. But in theory, you could duplicate any spells that you actually cast on this, which makes it incredibly good as a target for a deck like that, and probably the reason why this will see a lot of play. It also combos pretty good with Pelagos, which is the other legendary for Priest, and it looks like Priest will have some really fun decks to actually try out this set. The next card is The Light It Burns, which is a 1-cost holy spell that deals damage to a minion equal to its attack. Really cool mini light bomb. Targets only 1 minion, which means it probably will see a lot of play. It's something that could be an easy removal tool, and it is a lot better than something like Holy Smite on most minions in the game that your opponent might actually play if they are playing an aggro-based deck. This could save you a lot of trouble in a lot of decks, and honestly, probably a pretty decent card for all. And now for Mysterious Visitor, which is a 2-cost priest spell with 2 attack, 3 HP. Battle cry, reduce the cost of cards copied from your opponent by 2. Really good for Thief Priest support. Honestly, I can't see a world where this doesn't see play. There is enough Thief Priest support in this set alone to make a deck like that actually meta relevant, and a lot of it is really good. It's going to be very frustrating to play against because it is actually stealing the cards out of your opponent's deck, which to me actually is more of a rogue idea, but some reason they didn't want to actually push it in rogue. They decided it in priest instead. Doesn't really matter. I like priest a lot, so it's a win in my books either way. I know a lot of people are going to be complaining about a card like this and all the other Thief Priest support, but it should be cool to see some type of new priest in the metagame. Now for Shaman's cards, the first one is Criminal Lineup, which is a 8-cost spell that chooses a random friendly minion, summon 3 copies of it. Overload. To theory, this would be really good in Evolve Shaman just because you can duplicate whatever minion you want. However, most of the time this is going to cost too much for it to be run in a deck like that. And I think the best ways to actually abuse this is by using some mana cheat with Mr. Smite or something else with charge. I know there is a spell from Onyxia's Lair that reduces the cost of a random spell in your hand by 5, which could be easily abused in combination with a card like this. However, that does require you to run a low amount of spells in the deck, and only to copy a Mr. Smite to get 3 additional copies, which in theory would be 24 damage, isn't enough to be a really meta warping combo, but it is a really funny combo that I actually kind of want to try out. Maybe not at the first day, but maybe later on the set. Now for the next card, which is Crud Caretaker, which is a 4-cost Paladin minion with 1 attack, 1 HP. Battlecry, summon a 3/5 elemental with taunt. Really good for Evolve Shaman. Good in general for Shaman just because it is a 3/5 elemental with taunt with an additional body on the board. But Evolve Shaman is probably where a card like this will actually see a lot of play, since I'm assuming the elemental will also be a 4-cost, and you basically get 2 4-cost minions for the price of 1. And now for more Totem Shaman support, which is Carving Chisel, which is a 2-cost weapon for Shaman with 1 attack, 3 HP. After your hero attacks, summon a random basic totem. This is great for Totem Shaman, and I can't see a world where Totem Shaman being a actual deck, this does not see any type of play, as you could in theory get 2 totems each turn, and given the next card that we'll go over, we'll see why something like that will be very important. The next card is Gigantic Totem, which is a 10-cost 8 HP 8 attack minion that costs 1 less for each totem you've summoned this game, which has the totem tag. Really good for Totem Shaman, really big payoff. Much better than the Dark Moon Fair or whatever set that one came out where it had the Death Rattle as a payoff. It's such an easy minion to just easily discount in whatever deck you actually want to run it in it. Though I don't think this will see play outside of Totem Shaman because it would be way too slow to actually run this in a deck that doesn't run some type of totem support. But in a totem-based Shaman deck, this will probably see a lot of play. And now for Warlock's last card, which is Suffocating Shadows, which is a 3-cost shadow spell. When you play or discard this, destroy a random enemy minion. A little bit of discard Warlock support, however, we didn't see enough for this to see much play, in my opinion. It is a 3-cost spell, so it isn't that bad on mana cost, and it can be duplicated with Tasman. So in theory, Control Warlock might actually want to use a card like this. But for now, for its main purpose in Discard Warlock, I don't think there is enough support for a deck like that to see play in that style of deck. Now for Warrior, Crazed Wretch, which is a 2-cost 1 attack 4 HP minion that has +2 attack and charge wall damage. I'm shocked that they're bringing back charge into Standard. There's been a lot more charge cards recently in Standard, and this just continues the idea behind it. I don't see a world where this one doesn't see much play because charge is always powerful, and some of the later cards will show why a card like this is going to be quite insane to actually get down, especially in a aggro-based warrior deck. Maybe we can actually move away from pirate warrior as aggro, but I very much doubt it because of one of the later cards. Okay, now for the next card, which is Imbued Axe, which is a 3 cost warrior weapon with 2 attack, 3 HP. After your hero attacks, give your damage minions +1/+1. Infuse 3, give +2/+2. Absolutely insane weapon that probably will see a lot of play. The infuse doesn't really matter too much, though it does just make a lot of the other synergies with damage minions even better. It's cool to see more weapon warrior support, even if we're not seeing weapon warrior as a way to buff up the weapons themselves, which could be really powerful in theory. Though this does compete with the Outrider's Axe and a few other weapons for 3 costs, or even Remoria, which is in this set too. So outside of a deck where you're actually damaging your own minions a bunch, I don't know how much play this will see, but in theory, I think this one will be really powerful because it is just an aura effect that in theory could buff up your entire board if you do play a bunch of minions. Now for the next card, which is Anima Extractor, which is a 2 cost warrior minion with 1 attack, 4 HP. Whenever a friendly minion takes damage, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. This is actually indirect support for Remoria, and probably actually was meant for Remoria, but this is really good for any minion that you can actually just have charge on. And honestly, I can't see a world where this doesn't see play. It's really cool to see the objective spell for warrior actually finally see a bunch of support in this set. It only took 2 additional sets for a card like that to see play, and I've been trying to make that card work for quite a while now. I'm actually quite excited to see a Enraged Warrior deck, and it is something that I've been wanting to try out again for quite a while. Sure, Frenzy kinda is the same thing, but I think this will be a lot better of a deck overall. Alright, the next card is Conqueror's Banner, which is a 2 cost spell for Warrior, which is their Covenant ability that reveals a card from each player's deck 3 times. Draw any of yours that costs more. Really good in big warrior. Reference to Joust back in the Grand Tournament, and that mechanic was actually quite fun to deal with, even though it wasn't the best one in the world. It was probably one of the worst mechanics that they've ever introduced. Actually, I think Inspire was technically worse than that. But I think if Big Warrior becomes a deck, a card like this will see a lot of play, but outside of that, I don't know if this will see too much play. It doesn't give your opponent any advantage. It is just additional draw power for you if you do have a bunch of big minions, which isn't going to be the most consistent thing in the world to actually try to get draw power off. Warrior has a lot more better draw power in the class as it currently stands to make a card like this see too much play. Now for a pirate, for some weird reason, Suspicious Pirate, which is a 3 cost pirate minion for warrior that has 3 attack, 4 HP. Battlecry, discover a weapon. If your opponent guesses your choice, they gain a copy. More weapon warrior support is a little bit annoying since this is one of those cards that if you choose the best weapon no matter what, your opponent will probably get the copy of it. However, if you choose the second best option, you might in theory play some mind games where your opponent doesn't actually get it. I do like these cards flavor-wise just because I do really like the idea of making your opponent try to figure out which one you actually want to gain. However, the possible downside might not be worth the upside for it. I do think there's probably 2 places you might want to run a card like this. First one being Questline Warrior, and in that deck I don't think you would want to actually run it, mainly due to the fact that if you did run it, in theory you could give your opponent some type of weapon while you actually have your questline reward, and you basically get no advantage out of it unless you got a really bad randomly generated weapon. And the other way would be in a weapon-based deck where you want to get additional copies of something that is very powerful, or even in an Enraged Warrior deck, as we have seen a lot of support for that type of deck too. Overall, I think this is probably just a alright card. It is a real shame though that we're seeing more pirate support, even though some of the other quest lines haven't seen barely any more support after their initial release, and it's historically been one of the better quest lines anyways. Alright, now for the last card, which is Riot, which is a 2-cost warrior spell that makes it where your minions cannot be reduced below 1 HP. This turn, they each attack a random enemy minion. This is basically Commanding Shout, except instead of drawing one card, you attack your opponent's board. I do think this will probably see a lot of play if a Enraged Warrior deck actually becomes a thing, and it does look like that would be the more interesting warrior deck to actually try out when it comes to a set like this. If Gurubashi Berserker is actually still in rotation, maybe that'll actually make that card see some play, though I can't remember if it actually is since I haven't seen it in quite a few years. There are a lot of really good Enraged minions such as Gromash or Furthering Berserker or some of the other cards that have recently come back in rotation. There was the one Tauren with Taunt. To make a card like this seem really playable, at least in my first opinion, and given some of the other cards we've actually seen in this set. Overall, I do think Enraged Warrior will probably be the go-to warrior deck for this one. Alright, so those were all the cards for Murder at Castle Nathria set. Let me know what decks you're most looking forward to using, and like always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye bye.